for practical application of the law, and here he doesn't mean Israeli law, he means Jewish law, it is difficult to rely on this, for it is not clear if we knew well the realities regarding them, nor is it clear whether up until our time their status has remained the same and not changed. But in regard to practical application of the halacha, they are not mamzerim. Now I have to stop for a minute. Most of you probably know at least the Yiddish Jewish phrase a mamzer, okay? But and a mamzer, you should excuse the expression, frequently translated as a bastard or an illegitimate child. There ain't no such bird in Jewish law, if you will, okay? A mamzer is not considered illegitimate. A mamzer is a child of a prohibited relationship, an incestuous relationship, an adulterous relationship, okay? The mamzer is still considered a member of the community, but a mamzer cannot be a Kohen or a Levi, for example. And according to the majority opinions, one mamzer must marry only another mamzer. Can't intermarry. Okay, mamzer doesn't have the negative term towards the individual, towards the child, or whatever that contemporary usage would apply to it. A mamzer is a particular status, like being a Kohen or being a Levi, or or something like that, or being a divorcee, or being a widow or a widower. That's what mamzer technically meant. Okay, an earlier response about Jews whom we didn't know their background were kind of categorized frequently as mamzerim. We can't run the risk of someone, and we talked a little bit about this last week, of someone who just says they're Jewish or behaves as if they're Jewish. We can't run the risk of giving them the privileges of serving as a Kohen or serving as a Levi, whatever. So we're going to classify them as mamzerim, meaning those whom we don't know or don't approve of their genealogy. Okay, so Moshe Feinstein, back to his responsum, says, since there are so many doubts that have been previously assigned to the background, remember the Yiddish word, the yichus, that's the status of the Ethiopians. Okay, now, regarding their Judaism, we must consider it as a safek. Now, safek, those of you who know Hebrew, is doubt. I have doubt about this, okay? So we consider them under the category, or I think I was saying before, like an overriding principle, that there's doubt as to whether or not this is truly the case. Are they truly Jewish? So we consider it a safek, and we require of them to have true conversion before we would permit them to marry within the Jewish community. Orthodox, again, only believing in marriage between Jews. Yet even before their conversion, it is a mitzvah, and then he translates mitzvah here, or at least this rabbi who made the translation from the Hebrew, as an active, positive precept. Okay? As an active, positive precept to save them, the Ethiopian Jews, from being drawn into non-Jewish communities and from danger, as law might be for any Jew, because we want to make sure that if they, there's doubt, but if they are Jewish, ultimately we are responsible for their welfare, for their safety. since there's doubt, we take it upon ourselves as a mitzvah to reach out to them and to try to protect them. Okay? One should also know that even in practical application of the law, they are not Jews. Nevertheless, since they think they're Jewish, since they consider themselves to be Jewish, and they sacrifice their lives for their Judaism, we are obligated to save them. So his first statement is that we're not addressing yet whether they are Jews, but and there's doubt about whether they are and they aren't. My first preference would be this is Rabbi Feinstein. My first preference is that they would convert when they come to Israel or before they get to Israel, which wasn't necessarily that they weren't necessarily able to do that. But if we're wrong, okay, there's doubt about it. So even if because of this doubt, we are still obligated to try to save them, to try to protect them. Okay. Now he continues on with this responsum to his grandson. As you mentioned, they shouldn't be brought to Israel unless they have undergone conversion, in order to not increase the concern for assimilation, meaning intermarriage with Jews who we recognize as having Jewish status. But if they have legally converted, as I have heard, he says, as I have heard some of them are doing, we shall consider them all Jews. We must assist them and support them for all needs of livelihood, physically and spiritually. And I suffer great anguish because I have heard that there are those in Israel who are not drawing them close in spiritual matters and are causing, God forbid, that they might be lost from Judaism. It seems to me these people are behaving so only because the color of the Falasha's skin is black. It is obvious that we must draw them close, not only because they are no different than the rest of the Jews, because there is no distinction in practical application of the law, of the halakha, because there is black, because one can say perhaps they are converts, therefore included in the mitzvah, v'ahavta lager, you shall love the convert. Okay? So to a certain degree, he's begging the question, are they Jewish or not? He says there's doubt, but even recognizing the doubt, we still should save them. We still should help them, try to convert them if possible. And under no circumstances do we make a distinction between them and other Jews with whom we are more familiar because of skin color. So in other words, he takes the responsum in a totally different way. I conclude with the hope that the situation for them will improve, and in the merit of observing all the mitzvot, we shall all soon merit to the ingathering of all the exiles by our righteous Messiah. And I sign it, your grandfather who loves you in heart and soul. Okay, Steve, you put your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, was this, with no disrespect to the rabbi, but his butt seems very firmly on the fence here. Has the state of Israel in any way recognized or implemented this type of opinion? It doesn't seem like, from the practical standpoint, they have. There are a lot of problems in Israel, social problems with the Ethiopian Jews. There are a lot of Jews who don't accept them. They serve in the army like regular Jewish Israeli citizens, and sometimes they get cold, nasty epithets. There have been cases of that. There was a case of the Israeli officer who called one of his recruits a nigger, and this is the Israeli army. That this is horrible. So there are issues with assimilation. They are very proud of their heritage. I would be doubtful that any of them undergo any conversion.
Oh no, they do. The question was, and the Supreme Court in Israel did rule. Of course, some of the rabbis rejected it because it was a civil decision rather than a religious decision. But the question was whether or not their conversion, so to speak, had to be according to Ashkenazi and Sephardi, custom and halacha, or whether the conversion could be according to Ethiopian custom. Okay,
he already has a problem with the Ethiopian custom. He said safek.
Well, no, I'm not talking Feinstein. I'm talking, like I say, this was resolved by the Supreme Court when some of the Ethiopian, I forget, and I'm blanking on the names of their religious leaders, but when they went to the court and said, we have been converting people to our brand of Judaism, our style, for thousands of years. Why now are you telling us that that's no longer valid? Okay, in our community, shouldn't someone be able to convert like that? And the Supreme Court said yes. The rabbinic court said no. So there's still, again, we have to. Most people are aware, but we tend to forget that probably 80% of the population of the state of Israel is not Orthodox, okay? and is troubled by the influence of the Orthodox especially when it comes into daily life. So yes, are there those? Is there great cultural difference? Yes, but there's also been great strides since the 1980s. There have been great strides in the assimilation and acculturation of the blacks and of those who come from other
one of the other people.
Michael, did you want to get in?
Yeah. Thank you. Converting, as I understand it, you don't convert someone who wants to be a Jew. They ask to be converted. You don't, as a Jew, you don't ask somebody to convert because that amounts to proselytizing, and Jews don't proselytize.
It depends on which century you're talking about. There have for the most part, we don't proselytize, we don't evangelize, we don't go out and say, hey, don't you want to join our community? But there have been times in our history when we did do that. Talk about Abraham, for example. But what you're saying is right. As a matter of fact, when someone comes and says, traditionally, when someone comes and says, I want to convert, I want to join the Jewish people, we're supposed to push them away. We're supposed to say, no, you don't want to do that.
Well, that's in the, as I understand it, that's in the Orthodox. In the Orthodox, if somebody comes to an Orthodox rabbi, as I understand it, the rabbi would say, well, what are you? And I will say, maybe I'm a Catholic. And the Orthodox rabbi would say, well, be the best Catholic you can be, and sends him on the way.
Three
and
times.
He comes back. Yeah,
three times.
That's what I was going to say. On the second time, the same thing. But if the person comes to the rabbi on the third time, that shows a great interest, and then the process, as I understand it, the process starts on the conversion to Judaism. That's
right.
In the Orthodox.
And I would say, based on my experience in the North American Jewish community, and some conversations with modern Orthodox rabbis, that's no longer the reality, except in the ultra-Orthodox community. Again, it's one of those examples of compromise, if you will, but a recognition that living in a melting pot society as we do, that there are going to be Jews and non-Jews who are who are getting married. There are Jews and non-Jews who affect each other's religious beliefs, and there are people who it just would not be that appropriate to try to turn them away and turn them away and turn them away. And they say, okay, we've gone through these 3 times. Now we can actually sit down and talk with you. So it doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't happen as much, but that was the traditional practice. Don't ask me why, because that was not the case historically. You know, before even the late Talmudic age, it was someone wants to come and join the community. Absolutely, you know, welcome them. Look at the story that we've told many times of Hillel and Shammai of, teach me everything that I want to know about being Jewish while standing on one foot. All you need to know to start off and be accepted is love your neighbor as yourself. Or with Ruth, just your people shall be my people, your God shall be my people, and boom, boom, that's the conversion ceremony. So, I apologize if there's anybody else who's trying to get into the conversation. I can only see on my laptop here, I can only see about 6 or 7 squares. So I don't know if you have to push a button or something like that. Steve, I know that your hand's up. I can't tell if there's anybody else.
I just wanted to ask something specifically about what was just raised.
Yeah.
About conversion, that I had thought that the change in attitude in Judaism towards converting came as a result of the onset of Christianity, or the beginning of Christianity, sort of lahavdil. That they were sort of, removing all the obstacles, pretty much, to join, to become a Christian was very, smooth, with no circumcision. The kashrut also was no longer an issue. That I had thought, and I don't know if if this is correct or if you can corroborate this, but I had thought it was mostly a response to Christianity more than anything else. That the more welcoming attitude, which Hillel exemplified, that you want to convert, of course you can convert. We're not going to discourage that, and then it changed altogether.
Right. At that, but then a couple hundred years later, when the church leads the efforts to openly proselytize and try to convert all the Jews, or if you don't convert, you will be killed. That changes the whole dynamic. And so the rabbis basically say, can we in good conscience encourage people to join us only to die, only to have die a martyr's death? And so we're going to try to convince people, persuade them not to do that.
I learned that.
So it does change. It does change.
And it does change. That has something to do with Christianity then as well.
It has with Christianity and with the tone of the times and the amount of religious, whatever the word is, today we would say interfaith relations. There's look in the golden age of Spain. Look at the relations between the Jews and the Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula at that point. There's a lot of conversion back and forth between Judaism and Islam. That again, it's a matter of where we're living and when.
Yes, when am I? Okay, let's go on.
Okay, Jeanette, were you trying to say something?
No.
Okay, all right.
What you did?
Okay, so so there's one example of, it's modern age. It's from 40 years ago, but and a contemporary situation that Moshe Feinstein, who, like I said, was considered one of the real Chochmei Hador, Gedolei Hador, one of the great ones of the generation in the Orthodox community, and that's how he was asked about the Falashas, the Ethiopians, and how he answers it. He mentions this principle, this overriding principle of safek, that when there's doubt, and he says, and I agree and I appreciate it. He says when there's doubt, in this case we are bound to still reach out and try to help them and try to protect them. We may doubt their Jewishness, but on the chance that they are really Jewish, and of course only the Messiah would be able to tell us. But in the absence of the Messiah coming, we need to make a decision right now. So let's respond to our better nature. Let's respond to the mitzvah of saving other Jews. And if we're wrong, we've been wrong, but we should do that and have the overriding principle not only of saving them, but the overriding principle of make sure that no decision is made about them based on their skin color. That's not a Jewish way of looking at it. Okay.
Rabbi,
Someone?
that's Chris. Chris Hager.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't see you on my screen, so go ahead.
No, I am blocked. I can figure out how to turn on my picture here, but I have a question. May I?
Please, I'll try to have an answer.
Okay, yes. I'm wondering if the same thing happened, or is it something similar with the Sephardic Jews, or it's not? Are they also having issues with the Sephardic?
In Israel?
Yeah.
Well, there unfortunately, when the great migration of Sephardic Jews in the early days of the state, when they came to Israel, there was a lot of discrimination.
Okay.
It's not so much anymore. Certainly there's a lot of marriage between Ashkenazi and Sephardi, and I don't mean husband and wife, I mean marriage of customs. And if you listen to, I'm
Right.
sure that Steve has had some too. If you listen to some of the contemporary, the most modern music that comes out of Israel today, and Michael G probably has, could address this too. The music that comes out of Israel has very, very strong Sephardic background to it. So there originally it was very difficult. I would say even until the late 60s, maybe into the 70s. I remember when I lived with a family in Haifa in 1965. My adopted mother, so to speak, refused to let me go visit a classmate and spend the night at the classmate's home because it was a Sephardic family.
Oh.
And that was 1965. It would not happen today.
Could I just? I'm not trying to hog the discussion here, but I did want to say something I think is relevant. That it's not actually Sephardi who were
that's true.
prejudiced.
That's true.
It was more the Mizrahi community. It was specifically people from North Africa, Morocco, people from the southern Arabian Peninsula, Yemen, who had very different cultures. It wasn't like the, I don't know if you were at my Ladino songs session that I had, but I had some guests who were Sephardi, where originally they could track their ancestry back to Spain. They lived on the Isle of Rhodes. Those folks never really encountered any sort of discrimination. It was Mizrahi. It was the Moroccans, Algerians, Yemenites. They came very poor. They often weren't educated. They had big families, and they got very condescending treatment from
Yeah, that's
the
it's good.
in-place
Thank you.
European establishment that was Israeli. Now it's that there's more of, mixing. So it's not Sephardi per se. I think the Mizrahim have ended up, which means Eastern in Hebrew, which is the Middle Eastern Jews, have sort of gotten lumped in with the Sephardim.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
was
No,
sort of
no,
process.
I
But-
appreciate the clarification. Thank you for doing
Yeah.
it if it was misleading.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And there was actually a party in Israel that was called the Black Panthers.
Right.
They had a Black
Mhm.
Panther
I
party
heard that.
in
Yeah.
the 60s, though they were Moroccan. They
Yeah.
weren't declaring, we're representing Sephardim. They were representing Mizrahim,
Right.
Moroccans
Yeah.
and Algerians,
Yeah.
who lived
Gail,
in the
yes.
poor neighborhoods.
Yes, I was living in Israel in 84, 85, and 86 when the Ethiopians were coming in great numbers. And I remember a poster that was very popular. It was all over Israel that I recall. And it was a picture of just an arm and a hand, one black and one
Yeah.
white.
Uh-huh.
And that was kind of, I think, the government's effort to show unity or something, but from the secular, obviously.
Right. Right. Well, there had been the Israelis felt that they really had made a lot of mistakes when this Mizrahi, when this major immigration, the Aliyah, had come from the Arab countries,
Okay.
and they acknowledged that there was a lot of mea culpa. There was a lot of we did this wrong, and we need to try to do our best with the Ethiopians. So yeah,
Thank you,
what
Rabbi.
you're talking about, right?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in case anybody didn't, hello. In case anybody didn't know, we are faced with a pandemic. In case anybody didn't know, so certain questions come up. The one that we can look at. Especially as it affects us, I found both the responsa from the conservative movement and from the reform movement about having and we didn't joke about it, but we do joke about it. We take it seriously, but we joke about it. Is whether or not like. The way that we see ourselves right now, is this considered a minyan? Can you have a remote minyan? In which prayers can you say remotely and whatever? But before I get into that, the conservative movement and rather than one rabbi, what the conservative movement and the reform movement do is that they have they pass it on to a committee, right? A group of experts rather than just the one expert. The conservative movement calls it the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, and in the reform movement it's just called the Responsa Committee. But before we get to the question of the minyan, I found some very quick. Now these are summaries rather than the long extended things. But in the conservative movement of how to maintain a respectful approach to halacha and minhag, that's custom, and Masorah, which is tradition. How to respectfully recognize those. In a time of COVID-19. So, for example, I'm going to assume that everybody knows what the Chevra Kadisha is, right? The Chevra Kadisha is the burial society. They're the ones who would stay with the body, cleanse the body. It's called tahara. That's the ritual cleansing of a body, and then make sure that the burial takes place in a proper and respectful manner. Okay, So, the question, should the Chevra Kadisha members perform tahara, the cleansing of a body, of someone who has died of COVID-19? Or should that be discouraged or even prohibited because of health concerns for and these are volunteers. It's a sacred mitzvah to participate in the Chevra Kadisha. No one gets paid for it. So these are volunteers. The committee, this is conservative. The committee does their response, and it says if the Chevra Kadisha decides to resume performing tahora, whether or not the deceased died from COVID, standard infectious disease precautions should be in place to protect the team from infection from the deceased. The handling of the body and its dressing, being wrapped in shrouds, may be done. The body may be wiped, and may place the body in the coffin, et cetera, subject to civil authorities. In other words, they are saying, I don't know about the Orthodox, this is conservative. Conservative are saying this is an example of what's called in halacha, or in Jewish legal terms, dina de malchuta dina, that the law of the land or of the sovereignty becomes our law, with only a few exceptions. We'll get to that in a minute. But dina de malchuta dina, some of you know the Hebrew word din, or din is judgment, or the law of the sovereignty of the kingdom becomes the law. Someone was saying before about an early Christianity, that law is translated as render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, render unto God that which is God's, for those of you who might know New Testament literature. So in other words, this is a case where we try and we want to still fulfill the mitzvah. This is only, we're talking volunteers. So someone could particularly say, no, I'm not comfortable participating in this mitzvah. They do not have to feel guilty about it. They do not have to be responsible. But the Chevra Kadisha can still fulfill its ritual obligation unless the local civil medical authorities, the health officials, say, no, it can't be done. Okay? Now, so having said that, I'm going to throw this out to you. Normally, dina de malchuta dina, normally we would defer, Jewish law defers to the civil law, okay, with only a couple exceptions. And then, does anyone want to try to speculate on what those, in general terms, what those exceptions would be? That if the civil authorities tell you that you must do something, but it goes against your religious convictions, which would be some where you'd have to say, no, I will not listen to the civil authorities. Jeanette, I know that you wanted to say something.
Technically, it's when the law itself is bad, is unjust.
If it's unjust.
If the law itself, like the apartheid or the, what was the guy, Jim Crow laws, technically, we're supposed to at least pay lip service to talking out and trying to do something in the interests of the other persecuted people. That's good. When we're not supposed to do
right.
That.
Okay. And generalizing it would be so that if the civil authorities are telling you that you must disrespect another human being, it's not only, obviously we would think in terms of murder, but it's not just murder in the physical sense. It's also ruining someone's reputation, for example, or making them feel inferior, second class, in the examples that you're talking about with apartheid or Jim Crow. Yes, true.
Also, humiliate. You're not allowed to
Right.
humiliate another person.
Exactly. Or tell, be a talebearer, lashon hara, gossip about someone that causes them to lose their self-respect or their reputation. Right. Okay. What else could the civil authorities tell you to do that in that case, in a case where your Jewish principles would say, no, I won't follow the civil authorities?
Is to hello?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we hear you, Michael.
Okay, it's to anything that would disrespect the Shabbat.
I don't know if it's totally disrespect the Shabbat. I'm not sure about that Shabbat or holidays. For example, Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a Shabbat, all right? Yom Kippur is Shabbat Shabbatot. Yom Kippur is the Sabbath of Sabbaths. If the civil authorities said to you, you must eat on Shabbat, okay, or you must eat on Yom Kippur, are you allowed to eat?
Well,
Or must you eat?
Well, that would really depend. It depends who is the civil is the civil authority a physician, a doctor?
No. Not a health. Not a health. Medical is something else.
Right.
Medical is something else. This is the local policeman, let's say.
No, I would not eat. No, you cannot eat.
I
Not
think
eat.
Ruth Ann?
it would probably depend on what the penalty would be for not eating.
Okay.
I mean, if the penalty was death or something like that, then definitely, according to Jewish law, you have to eat.
Right. That's the distinction. That's the distinction. It's to preserve your own life or someone else's life. Again, that sadistic policeman who says you eat on Yom Kippur, on your holiest of fast days, you eat or else I'm going to kill this person. Then yes, you and not only you can, you must eat to save your own life or to save that other person's life. All right. Can we think of another example?
How about an autopsy?
How about, I'm sorry, someone said something.
It's Marilyn. How about an autopsy? We don't do autopsy.
We don't do autopsy technically unless if the civil authorities insist upon it, especially if it's put in the context of that we may be able to save other lives by doing this. Yes, you are allowed to do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
You don't have to do it, but you're allowed to do it.
Yeah,
Or
depends
allowed
on
to have it done.
Rabbi?
circumstance.
Rabbi, this is Chris. Can I make a question? I have a question.
Okay, Chris, but I want to make sure that we get to the last other
I'm
example.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm just thinking, as I was reading the encyclopedia of Jewish history, that I realized that many Jewish people in the Golden Era were told to convert to Christianity or Catholicism, better yet, or they will die.
Right.
Is that something that you could apply on that?
No, because thank you for the segue transition. You did it well. Because the other one is, what if the civil authorities tell you to renounce your God or blaspheme your God?
That's
Okay.
true.
Then
Right.
you allow yourself to be killed rather than the transgression or the sin of idolatry or just of worshiping another god or conversion, right? That's why we have the conversos. That's why we have the Marranos who still practice their Judaism secretly. Right. Incidentally, there is a fourth category. Also, we're not getting into it. Maybe it would be. It's probably just not that appropriate for Tisha B'Av, but and that is if the civil authorities or this sadistic policeman that we're talking about insist that you participate in one of those prohibited sexual behaviors, or that you're supposed to allow yourself to be killed rather than doing that. But that links together with, as Michael had said, about humiliating someone or extending your own personal power over another person. Okay, all right. So I started with the COVID thing on the Tahara. Can you participate in the Chevra Kadisha? Do you have to, or are you allowed to? And that's an example of listening to the civil authorities of Dina de Malchuta Dina. They try to, in all of these responsa, whether it's Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, they try to give not only a direct answer to the individual or the community's question, but they also try to give my term, these overriding principles. They try to turn them, I had mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, they try to turn them almost into curricula or syllabi, into teaching moments, teaching opportunities. What can we learn? In addition, here's the answer to the question, if I've got an answer, but also here are some of the other things that you need to remember about halakha, about Jewish practice, about Jewish background as a result of your question. Let me remind you that here's one of these overriding principles, if you will. So here's how the conservative movement is dealing with some questions about, in the time of COVID-19, about B'nai Mitzvah. All right. Some of you in your own families have been maybe, or close friends. I know that certainly that's the situation that I've been involved with. A young person becomes bar mitzvah on the date that they come of age in the Jewish calendar. Nevertheless, the observance of B'nai Mitzvah celebrations are a significant milestone for young people, for family, for community. And rescheduling of the B'nai Mitzvah are a significant source of anxiety. How should such situations be handled in a time of COVID? Is the question, and the Conservative Committee on Jewish Law and Standards answers the following way. B'nai Mitzvah ceremonies should ideally be conducted in the presence of a minyan, with understanding that additional guests may be watching on live stream. Even that may not be safe or feasible in the current circumstance. In any case, celebrations and parties should be delayed until public health guidance allows for gathering. In other words, we're postponing the bar, but we're still going ahead with the mitzvah, right? In the current circumstances, many B'nai Mitzvah observance and celebrations are being postponed. Many communities are asking for guidance how to handle these observances, whether rescheduled, where young people have invested significant effort learning a particular Torah reading or a Haftarah reading that the congregation has now skipped. So the official conservative movement, for those of you who are interested in this, is here are the following options. Bar mitzvah could be delayed, the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, could be delayed until the next time that the Torah portion is read as part of the annual cycle. In other words, tell the kids that they got to wait for a year. God willing, that COVID is done, right? Okay. If the celebration is rescheduled to another Shabbat morning, a portion, meaning the Torah portion that the child has already learned, may be read as an additional portion. Some of you may know the term, the maftir. That's like an additional portion from a second Torah scroll. And the Haftarah, it's okay to read the Haftarah that they've already prepared in place of the regularly assigned Haftarah. This would not be recommended on a Shabbat that already has a specially mandated reading. In other words, on another holiday, or Rosh Chodesh, the new moon, or during Hanukkah or something like that. If the celebration is rescheduled to a Shabbat afternoon or a weekday morning, Monday or Thursday, when you also read Torah, the reading the young person has studied could be substituted or added to the regular weekly reading, even though it will be the incorrect parsha. Now, Orthodox would not necessarily do this, but conservative and reform are saying yes. At least 10 verses of Torah must be read when the minyan gathers. And since there are moments in history in which people were on different Torah cycles, these 10 verses will still fulfill that obligation. If the child knows at least 10 verses that may be divided into 3 aliyot, that would be one option. It would also be possible to take out 2 scrolls, to combine 3 weekday aliyot into 2, have the child read the original maftir as the 3rd. A Haftarah reading might be added to Shabbat Mincha, though there's disagreement as to whether it could be done with the brachot. So they're saying we can judge it around, and we respect the fact that the child has already been preparing one certain set of verses, so let's make it happen for him or her to be able to include those things that he or she's already been preparing, rather than saying that's in the priority of things, rather than saying, no, we can't do it, you gotta learn an entirely new parsha. Okay. Can a wedding take place? How do we do a wedding? Now, this is from Jewish perspective, not from the civil perspective. Can a Jewish ceremony be conducted virtually? Rabbi Aaron Alexander writes, when it's determined that the wedding cannot be postponed, here's what you do. The couple must be in the same physical space. Okay? Now, several months ago, when we were talking about life cycle, we spent a lot of time on the Jewish marriage ceremony and chuppah and erusin and kiddushin and all the various dynamics of the ceremony. All right? The couple must be in the same physical space, and for the time being, that physical space will be called their chuppah, even if it's not a canopy. All right? But that will be their chuppah. This may present challenges in certain cases, in which case the medical and public health experts must be consulted before proceeding. That basically means who has to be wearing a mask or not wearing a mask and things like that. The officiating rabbi and 2 valid witnesses may be present via site-based technology. Okay, so in other words, the bride and groom have to be together, but the rabbi or rabbis, cantor, and the 2 valid witnesses do not have to be in the same place. But they do have to be witnessing in real time. They can be in up to 3 different physical locations. One witness, whether it's one of the 2 witnesses or the rabbi, should have a copy of the ketubah. In other words, the bride and groom should have their ketubah, but at least one of the witnesses or the rabbi also has to have a copy of the ketubah. Right? Each bride and groom should with the one ketubah, but you have 2 separate pens, so that they're not sharing the same pen. The rabbi reads the ketubah, or the witness, whichever one has a copy of it, reads the ketubah and asks online if each of the bride and groom accept the conditions of the ketubah, so that the witnesses can then see the bride and groom then each separately pick up the pen in front of them and to sign the ketubah. First witness signs the ketubah, snaps a picture, or makes a PDF, sends it to the second witness. Then the same procedure goes on to the rabbi, who then sends, after all three, two witnesses and the rabbi, then send it back as a PDF to the couple, who either print it or bring it up on their device and hold it up together so that everyone can see that there have been the signatures. Okay, at that point, then that fulfills the part of the ceremony. Again, originally there's two separate ceremonies. There's Erusin and there's Kiddushin. Erusin, translated as betrothal, that's the legal part. That includes the signing of the ketubah, and then the Kiddushin is the blessings and the wine and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so once we've done the ketubah, that's for the Erusin. Then the first blessing is chanted. That's Borei Pri Hagafen. Okay, the couple drink from separate glasses. Everyone, the witnesses and everyone else says Amen. Okay, then the exchange of rings. At this point, the couple can move straight to saying a blessing or vows to each other if they wish, breaking the glass, and saving the remaining of the 7 brachot, the Sheva brachot. Some of you may know about that. That the rest were traditionally not said under the chuppah. They were said at the luncheon or the reception afterwards. So it's okay to postpone reciting the rest of the 7 blessings after Borei Pri Hagafen, or if those who want to include it, as long as there's a minyan online. Okay, you can't do all of them unless there's a minyan online. Okay, a physical chuppah is preferred, but the inability to acquire one doesn't invalidate the wedding, because chuppah is not obligatory for the marriage ceremony. Okay, one more question about chuppah, and then we have to close it for the day. But okay, Rabbi Elliot Dorff answers this question. Elliot Dorff is one of the scholars who teaches in the conservative rabbinic school. What happens to the original ketubah if the wedding is rescheduled? Because the ketubah already has, the blanks are filled in with the date and the place of when the wedding is going to take place. If a wedding is postponed and the couple already has a filled out ketubah except for the signatures that recorded the date originally planned, the date and the place originally planned for the wedding, the calligraphed ketubah may be displayed at their wedding, even under the chuppah, and it may be signed on the postponed date of the wedding. But another printed ketubah with the actual date that the wedding is take place should also be signed on the postponed date of the wedding and used for the ceremony. So the calligraphers get double, get double out of all this. You can probably guess, because as we mentioned, there's this hierarchy of the mitzvot, of the customs and the ceremonies. And we mentioned a number of months ago that one of the mitzvot that takes the highest priority no matter what is Brit Milah, is the bris, circumcision. Circumcision is always on the 8th day. Okay? You do not need a minyan for a bris, but it must take place on the 8th day, unless, as we've said frequently, unless the medical authorities say, but not necessarily because of COVID, but the medical authorities would say that the child, the male child, that the circumcision somehow would be endangering his life. Okay, it's not like because of COVID and grandparents or the godfather, the Sandik, it can't fly to get back to Chicago, so he has to drive, and we have to wait an extra couple days. No. That it takes place on the 8th day, no matter what, even if it's Tisha B'Av and even if it's Yom Kippur, takes place on the 8th day, no matter what, unless the child's health is
At risk.
is at risk. Right. Okay. I know that some of you had sent in other questions, so we're gonna put them on hold. I know there are questions about kashrut, and Jeanette even sent me a thing with her own midrashic interpretation of why certain changes may have been made, or why kashrut that begins only with the question of you shall not don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, and then why that became such a strong statement that leads into all of the different kosher laws. Some people were asking about patrilineal descent, matrilineal descent, who is a Jew based on whether your mother was Jewish, whether the father was Jewish, whether there's been Jewish education involved, not Jewish education involved. There are lots of other things that we could talk about. I'm out of time, but I will hold on to these and promise that in the fall we'll find an opportunity to continue on with this. But there are certainly questions that I've been fascinated with that have to do with many of the advances in medical technology and advances and advances may not be the right word. I'm adding a value judgment, but some of the changes that have happened in our society that Jewish law, contemporary Jewish law, has had to deal with, even with the Orthodox. When you talk about homosexuality, when you talk about same-sex marriage, when you talk about a whole approach to, like I said, biomedical issues, the literature can be fascinating, and we'll find a time. I promise. We'll find a time when we can look at some of this. And again, God willing, hopefully we'll be able to be sitting at the same table rather than just looking each other in these small squares to do that. So I thank you, those who have been with us through this journey over the last 6-7 months, and look forward to seeing you again soon.